Hello my friends, this is Dr. M to support your journey with principles of economics. Today we'll talk about money banking and monetary policy. Based on the previous presentations, we have discovered that in macroeconomics our objective to entertain several different variables. In particular, we want to make sure that we address nominal gross domestic product in spite of its limitations that we discussed, price level, real gross domestic product, and unemployment. However, realistically, we really want to make sure that we also address money, and that's what we'll discuss today. So let's start. Basically, given that money is the medium of exchange and it serves also a role of accounting for the wealth, it is important to understand what role money plays within those parameters: gross domestic product and unemployment and the price level. So after World War II, citizens of Germany used to be paid 4 times a day with lots of paper money because there was a hyperinflation. Today, there are many countries that run hyperinflation when the central bank prints lots of money, and we discussed that in previous videos. Central bank has a privilege to print money, and when it does, it creates revenue. It's exclusive privilege. No one can compete with that, and no one can do that. It's illegal to print money except by the Federal Reserve or central bank. So essentially, if we want to look deeper into this issue, we have to recognize that people really are not interested in money. People are more interested in goods and services that they can buy with money. And that's important to treat money as a derivative. To use or store money for the sake of the paper form does not make a lot of sense for people. What it does, what you can buy with this money, the purchasing power and its access to a variety of goods and services. Thus, we really want to understand what determines the output, gross domestic product, not just in nominal terms, our previous discussions, but in real terms, or should I say inflation adjusted gross domestic product, and thus it brings us to real income. So when people get paid, when companies get compensated, they're not interested in nominal numbers of compensation, but in real numbers, such as how much they can purchase at the marketplace. So, and we're going to talk about today that relationship. We also looked at how unemployment is related to gross domestic product, specifically through the labor market. If you want to watch the previous videos, and it will show you such relationship as Phillips curve, when unemployment was related to the level of inflation, and gross domestic product depends directly upon unemployment through the production function. So by definition, money is the currency and coins in the hands of non-bank public. So we need to understand that checkable deposits in the bank of in the hands of non-bank public is what we are referencing by money. I think it's important to know that in the United States, it used to be until 1933 that Americans could trade for gold, and until 1961 for silver at Treasury. Not anymore. Now, the dollar paper money states, "In God we trust," and thus no exchange for gold and silver is available. And if it is so that the dollars have that statement, "In God we trust," and in our schools it is illegal to have religious attributes, then it should be illegal to have paper money in our schools. Generally, public excludes the federal government because we know that the federal government is engaged in a variety of purchases, goods and services, but it's not used to make exchanges at reserves. So let's go and determine the demand, checkable deposits in the hands of non-bank public, essentially. Now let's determine the attributes of money, just as a summary. And basically there are two attributes. One attribute of money is going to be unit of account, and the other one is medium of exchange. Many years ago, as long as we can date human history, different civilizations used different type of medium of exchange and unit of account. And in some civilizations, they use land, and land used to serve as well as other property as unit of account and medium of exchange. So it was not very convenient because you cannot take your land to a distant marketplace and exchange for housing very easily, although it is possible. So it used to be inconvenient to trade goods for goods, and then the paper money shows up as the rescue. Typically, both functions, unit of account and medium of exchange, was also served through some crafted properties, such as people used to make coins from the wood or from the silver or from the gold. They would prefer to choose some method that would have some lasting properties. And at that point, it was decided that paper money is serving much better purpose because it's light, you can take it anywhere you want, and essentially from economic perspective it's more efficient. What I would like to do next is to discuss demand for money along with the cost and the benefit. Essentially, to use money, one must hold money. So we have a demand to hold money. And I am being very careful here because, again, people don't demand money per se. they demand goods and services. And money is sort of a derivative that allows them to import goods and services into their everyday life. Thus, holding money will depend upon the cost and the benefit. Just like with anything else we have discussed previously, there is a cost of doing something versus the benefit of doing something. Why the Federal Reserve, a central bank, would ever bother to change interest rates for the banks to borrow money? That is an interesting question, because that's about time to address it. One way to address central bank policy when it is positioned to change the interest rates for banks to borrow money from them essentially is to address this cost of holding and the benefit of holding. And that's what drives the entirety of this decision when the central bank changes interest rate. It becomes a front page news. Essentially, the benefit of holding is to acquire some interest that could result from holding money over time. And the cost of holding is the purchasing power over time could be reduced due to the inflation. When the prices move positively or they increase over time, we call this inflation, if you recall. And now what I would like to do is to establish this relationship between the money and inflation. So we start with review. Gross domestic product is paramount objective in macroeconomics to understand how it's going to change, whether it's going to go up, down, or it will remain unchanged. And nominal GDP is typically denoted with letter Y. Money demanded, we can denote it by M sub D, is the amount of money that people want to hold. Let's talk about function of holding money. Functionally, demand for money depends upon two things. One is desired cash balance ratio, that is labeled by K in front of you. And the value of K depends on interest rate, nominal interest rate. Now I am just implicitly building up our discussion towards understanding how Federal Reserve or central bank in any country, when changing interest rates, effectively is changing the cost and the benefit of holding money. So here you are in front of you, historically, you are observing how interest rates are changed by the central bank due to the desired cash balance ratio, which is in turn depends upon interest rate that is determined at the marketplace. One thing that we also want to understand is the nominal GDP. And the best way to think through this using example. Let's suppose that the nominal GDP is $1 trillion, hypothetically. An existed interest rate which hasn't happened in reality, but it used to hold at 4% for a long time, then as a result, we will find demand for money is cash balance ratio, just using this formula that was presented to you at the previous slide, cash balance ratio times nominal GDP, and you get demand for money in the amount of $100 billion. So the Federal Reserve must make sure that $100 billion is available at the marketplace as it is supported by nominal GDP and given interest rate. So we have learned a lot already today, and what I would like to add to this discussion, and it's not to serve to muddy the waters, but reality, as you understand from my previous presentations, is always more complex than what you learn from the textbook or from universities. Reality is such, my friends, that in this case we only limited ourselves to nominal GDP of the United States. Hypothetically, that was equal to $1 trillion. And we also limited ourselves to the nominal interest rate at 4% that belongs to the United States. And also cash balance ratio was at 0.1 that was measured in the United States. Reality, however, is more complex because US dollars are demanded by other individuals across the border, foreigners. US dollars demanded by those who live in Mexico, in Canada, in Europe, in Africa, and many other places. Thus, when demand for US dollar is going up among foreigners, which has happened in 2020, then demand for US dollars goes up. And there is this shortage, so to speak, that is resulting from the fact that increasing number of foreigners demand US dollars, whether it's because it's more stable currency than their own currency or for any other reasons. Maybe because foreigners fell in love with some product of Microsoft or Apple company, which is an American company in either way, and thus you must hold US dollars in order to enjoy their product. So let me stop here at that point because we have covered a lot of ground already, and I will pick up when we return. Thank you guys for your time.